it's not possible to deliver great customer experience without great collaboration across an organization. If you truly want to drive change in an organization, it is so important to think about how you will celebrate and reward those examples of great collaboration within the organization, because that is the only way that truly great customer experience will come about.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host Bhushan, and today we have a CX expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce to the magic of Engati. Engati is world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform, available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions created across 187 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Following a 27-year career at British Airways, Jo Boswell set up a Sentio-B, a customer experience consultancy that advises, mentors, and coaches boards and senior leaders on driving transformation in customer experience. Jo helps organizations on how to best use customer data, insights, and technology to enhance customer experience to unlock business opportunities and value. Her extensive knowledge in digital transformation and delivering personalization at scale allows her to consult a range of industry sectors and lead the cultural change needed to transform the customer experience. Welcome to the show, Jo. We are pleased to have you to talk to us today. But before we dive into the interview with Jo, don't forget to subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from throughout the leaders from around the globe. So Jo, let's start with the questions.
Hello.
Okay, so here's our first question. How the customer experience landscape changed since the pandemic? What trends do you predict for 2021?
Okay, so I mean, what a year it's been. We're just coming up to the end of 2020, and I think so many businesses have had to dramatically adapt to survive throughout this pandemic, and I think in particular, obviously, one of the big impacts that we've seen is the whole shift to moving previously, contact center staff to home working, and some major impacts and challenges for businesses around how they do that. And supporting their colleagues who, have sort of had their own home lives completely disrupted by having the work life, brought into it. And I think we've also seen a huge shift in customer behaviours, particularly in the shift towards digital channels, particularly as companies have really struggled to provide the service levels that they would like to over phone lines and so on, and in a lot of instances where they've also had to potentially shut stores or shut the sort of physical entity, and so we've seen a huge surge in customers who are probably not previously all that comfortable with digital channels, have shifted their behaviour and are defaulting now to those digital channels. But this is a set of customers who really require a lot more sort of help and tuition, through that journey. So, I think we're seeing certainly with that shift, a change in customer behaviour that is definitely likely to continue through into 2021. I think also on the customer side, customers are increasingly looking to brands to see how they are treating their employees as well. So I think, in terms of the sorts of things that a business can do that will really resonate with customers and create admiration from their customers. It is a lot more around how they are treating their own employees as well these days. And, I think the connection between customer experience and employee experience has always been a strong one, but I think more and more businesses are now really waking up to the reality that actually the internal experience really needs to mirror the values that they expect their employees to demonstrate to their customers and to the outside world. So, I think customers are a lot more discerning when they look at brands to see how they're behaving, and in particular how they look after their own people. So, I think some of the sort of examples that I would look to, I mean, actually in my own experience, I thought my local gym was really great at handling all of the shifts and changes that we've had to navigate our way through. And interestingly, I mean, I've been a member of this gym for many, many years, probably over 20 years, but previously I would say actually my relationship with the gym was probably quite functional. So, I did renew every year, but it was because the gym was convenient, it's located close by and they've got good equipment, but I wouldn't say I had that kind of loyalty that would make me a true advocate for the gym. That has really shifted this year, and the reasons why is that they were proactive, extremely proactive when the gym had to shut. So they started to find alternative ways in which they could stay connected with us, their customer base, and finding alternative ways to kind of help us with our needs to still stay active and stay fit all throughout lockdown. So they were posting, on-demand videos on their YouTube channel that we could access for free. They proactively told us that they were going to be freezing our gym membership. And then they adapted everything at the gym in order to then welcome us back once lockdown was lifted. And, they've gone through a sort of huge shift in their internal processes to ensure that equipment is all wiped down and there's plenty of cleaning and so on. But throughout all of that, what I could see very clearly demonstrated was how well they were looking after their own staff and a lot of the freelance trainers that are frankly dependent, upon that gym for their livelihoods. And I have to say that the whole way in which they were sort of demonstrating that empathy towards us as customers and also to their own employees has really kind of lifted my relationship with that gym onto a higher level, and I feel that, I'm telling you about it now, I feel that emotional loyalty that actually previously didn't exist for me in my relationship with them. And that's all down to, the fact that they've really, I think, demonstrated, what are kind of essential customer experience principles. So, they've behaved with empathy in a very human way. They've been proactive and, they've tailored the experience accordingly. So, I think those are the sort of essential elements of customer experience, which haven't really changed, and and that isn't changing moving into 2021. But certainly when we look at the context in the outside world, that continues to be massively challenging for so many consumers, and despite the fact that a vaccination has been started, the vaccination program has started, I think, we are still going to be facing the fallout, as consumers from the pandemic for a long time yet. And so I think, if you like, the context and customer expectations as we move into 2021 essentially mean that the imperative for brands, really to live out those customer experience principles is even more urgent. And, and I think customer patience with brands that, are not resolving those points of friction in their experience by, joining up the data and the experience end to end by harnessing the technology that enables an organization to have that unified conversation with customers, regardless of the channel of interaction. I think if brands fail to do that, then they will get left behind and customers will punish them by taking their business elsewhere. So I think, essentially we're really seeing a speeding up, of the urgency with which organizations need to act. And I think effectively that means stopping the procrastinating and, talking about the strategy, but actually just getting on and doing it. The proliferation of channels, and the move to digital, I think means that connecting the experience in that omni-channel way is going to become even more important. And again, I think, in the past, companies have been able to sort of, get by without really making those true linkages. And I think that is no longer the case. So, integrating the data, integrating channels from a technology point of view, it will be an imperative in 2021. I think the working from home thing is really interesting because I don't think that is going to go away. So probably a lot of organizations put some processes in place at the time that the pandemic first hit, from a business continuity point of view. But I think what it's done is actually it's created a complete shift in thinking around, business models for delivery and thinking about, how organizations can be more flexible in terms of the employment offering and having people, working in a more flexible way. But clearly, that does put huge pressure and challenge on the technology that delivers that. And I think in particular from a customer experience perspective, it is imperative to ensure that, if people are working from home, they've got access to the right data and insights to deliver that personalized and proactive customer experience that we need to aspire to. So, I think it's a really interesting opportunity in creating, potentially a more meaningful and flexible employee experience, but it's not without some significant challenge. So yeah, I think from that perspective, then the employee experience, as I mentioned earlier, is going to continue to be a huge focus for organizations as we move through 2021. And it is ultimately the foundation for a great customer experience.
Couldn't agree more, Jo. Especially that example with the gym, it completely resonates with me because these small things, even the communication that they need to maintain, can take a huge thing on the loyalty of the customers, right? Constant communication would help me in pushing. Once the lockdown is over, it's gonna push me to go to the gym and work out with them, right?
Interestingly, actually, when you think about consumer behavior, that was one of the things that I felt benefited me because of the new processes. It actually required you to book a slot at the gym, and psychologically that's brilliant because you put that slot in your diary and then come hell or high water, you will turn up, whereas previously, it might be that I would have that intention in the back of my mind about going to the gym and then come up with an excuse not to.
Moving on to the next question. Do you think technology can get in the way of delivering a quality customer experience? How can businesses counter-react this?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, particularly given that there has been this huge shift to digital channels in 2020, which I think will continue. And yes, I think the simple answer is yes, it can get in the way of a really good customer experience. And it tends to do that in situations where organizations have not thought about the experience from the viewpoint of their customers. So I do see a lot of instances of organisations who kind of get slightly seduced, I think, by the technology and the art of the possible, and they overly focus on what their own pain point might be. So, you know, what can the technology do in terms of, you know, solving some part of their own process issue, but they're not focused then on actually what is the successful customer outcome that we can drive by using this technology. So I think, you know, it's a classic case that we often see of, you know, you need to fall in love with the customer's problem, not your solution. And that is, I don't know who that quote, I know I've written that quote down from somewhere and I don't know whose it is, so apologies to not being able to attribute it, but I think it's, you know, it's a very pertinent quote. And again, an example I would give here is a couple of years ago on my wedding anniversary, I went to what I thought was a really lovely restaurant. My husband and I wanted to treat ourselves, and this restaurant had come up with the concept of a digital sommelier, you know, the person that would normally come and offer you some wine recommendations. They had decided to put this on an iPad. So, you know, instead of having that wonderful human interaction of a sommelier who, you know, comes and has a little chat at your table, finds out, you know, what it is you've ordered, and it has a discussion, understands your kind of, you know, your particular needs in terms of what sorts of wines you like, and then makes, you know, some suitable suggestions, and by the way, you know, possibly picks up in that interaction that we're celebrating a special occasion. Instead of that, you know, my husband and I were sort of flicking through the pages of this iPad in a sort of really transactional way. It totally spoiled the magic of the evening, and, you know, just left me wondering, you know, if the restaurant really kind of understood, you know, the whole value of that human interaction. So yeah, I think the sort of key lesson from that is, you know, think about the customer journey through the customer's eyes. Think about what is the successful outcome you're trying to drive for them, and if the technology can help to achieve that outcome, then, you know, implement it in a way that is delivering some value for the customer without losing the potential for that human contact as well.
Very true. Like, technology is there to help make our lives easy, but there needs to be a balance between technology and human interaction, right? Like,
absolutely,
we love communications, and there needs to be some form of communication when there's this thing going on. So completely agree.
And it's about understanding, you know, how those little human touches can add value, you know, in that end-to-end journey. I mean, interestingly, so one of the things, you know, that we've experienced here in the UK during lockdown is having to queue to get into the supermarket, you know, because they're restricting the numbers of people that are allowed inside at any one time, which, you know, queuing to get into a supermarket is sort of, you know, unheard of. I'd never done it until this year. But actually, in some ways, I've quite enjoyed that, because at my local supermarket, it's the opportunity for somebody to meet and greet me, because they have somebody on the door now who is, you know, counting people in and out. And, you know, if they are welcoming me with, you know, a lovely smile, that makes me feel better. You know, it kind of lifts my spirits a little bit in the day on a, you know, very sort of transactional trip to the supermarket.
Very true. Moving over to the third question. Recently, we saw that Facebook had an update its platform to comply with the EU's privacy laws. We wanted to ask you, how can organizations harness customer insights to drive business success while addressing customers' privacy concerns? So could you just enlighten us with that?
Yeah, so another great question. And I think the important thing for all brands to remember is that collecting customers' data and using that in the customer experience, it all has to be about the value exchange, and that is the way that you can create customer trust. So I think one of the most important principles here is to be very open and transparent with customers about what data you are collecting and how you intend to use it, and be explicit about how that is going to be used in the entire customer experience. And it's important to make those statements as simple and as clear as possible, because again, I see so many organizations that draft these sort of huge privacy policies that just seem overwhelming, and that seems to get in the way of the customer experience. You just kind of scroll down to the end and click on it. But actually, if you can summarize the principles around that, and I'm sure there are some people who then want to read the entire detail, but I'm a lot happier actually just to absorb the headlines, if that's written in a way that's clear and transparent. And also, I don't feel like the customer is making me jump through hoops that the company isn't making me jump through hoops that I don't feel comfortable with in order to access that service. So I think if organizations are really clear and transparent, and can govern how the data is used internally, and I think there is a very important role of governance to be played around customer data. And I think it's imperative really that there is one person with complete oversight and say so really internally on what data can be collected and how it can be used. And certainly, back when I was working with British Airways and we were starting to do more and more with individual customer data, that customer data governance role was really crucial in terms of ensuring there was complete oversight about the way customer data was being used in different interactions and in different channels, and everything had to be sort of cleared through that one person who had oversight.
Yeah, very true. So moving on to the next question, what advice would you give to startups and SMEs who don't necessarily have access to the most sophisticated tools and technology on how to get better at CX?
So I think the first thing to say is the kind of framework for being able to deliver great customer experience is not a difficult one. It is about, firstly, being able to listen to your customers and listen to all the signals they are giving off. So that is about tuning into the data that exists in all the different channels and trying to bring that together. The second element of it is then organizing internally to be able to orchestrate a more joined up conversation. Now, actually, I would argue that that is an easier task to do in a smaller organization or even in a startup than it is in a larger organization. In a larger organization, you're facing the challenge of multiple channels, multiple colleagues who are also interacting with customers in those multiple channels, and a lot of legacy systems. Whereas actually, if you're a small company or a startup, I think you have the opportunity to establish things in the right way right from the very get-go, and think about the way in which systems are being established to gather that data. So I think that's the first thing is, think about how you can enhance those two functions of listening to customers and then orchestrating the experience. And I think, actually customer experience and enhancing it doesn't have to be a complicated thing. So particularly in smaller organizations, when what I see so often, the major challenge is embedding that culture of customer centricity. And I think that's a lot easier to do in a smaller organization, because it's easier for that message to come from the top and to be embedded in every part of the organization. So I think my advice to small organizations and startups would be, don't overcomplicate it. There are some very simple things that you can do. You don't need to have a sophisticated voice at the customer program. Ask your employees. Your employees are, they are the ears really, and they're tuned into what the customer is saying day in, day out. So I think, you can ask them what needs doing, and you'll get some great ideas. Empower your employees. So, it's the kind of Ritz-Carlton type approach where you create a budget and you assign that budget to individual employees and you empower them to make things right for the customer, because we know that, when we're proactive about recovering a negative situation, actually it can have a really dramatic impact on the way that customer feels about the organization. And then also think about how you can demonstrate that top-down leadership around customer centricity and the drive for that customer intimacy. And I think that in a smaller organization, it's so powerful to have the CEO, for instance, maybe spending a day on the phones to customers, and having those interactions, or even, getting them dealing with some of the customer complaints. I think those sorts of things are very demonstrative of an organization that is really, wanting to tune into customer sentiment and work out what it needs to do to improve the experience.
That's so true. Like this reminds me of that quote that it's not always about doing big things, right? It's about doing the small things in a bigger way. So all the basic things like communication, like how you interact with your customers, understanding their needs and wants, focusing on their feedbacks and giving it back to them, it plays such a big role when it comes to customer loyalty and customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts you would like to share with your audience, Jo?
Well, so I think, probably one thing that I would say when I reflect back to when I was leading a big customer experience initiative at British Airways, I think one of the things that I would have liked to have known at the time was that I needed to be focused and worrying less about the data and the tech, and more focused on what to do to drive the cultural change and to get the right governance processes in place. So that would be one of my sort of first pieces of advice for anybody that is, considering or is in a position that they're leading this kind of change in their organization, is they need to think about how they are going to drive that engagement internally, and in particular the desire for that kind of cultural change. The most important thing very often is actually just to get started. And there's that wonderful Eleanor Roosevelt quote, which is, "The way to begin is to begin." And I think actually, I see a lot of organizations that really sort of procrastinate about the vision and the business case and so on. And the best way to build some momentum is actually just to start. So figure out where a good place to start is, and, hopefully choose something where you will be able to see some results relatively quickly. And results in an area that the organization cares about. And that's the best way really to start to build momentum. I think probably another piece of advice for any senior CX leaders out there is think about how you're going to develop your resilience, because you will need it. And, there are times, particularly when you are trying to change the sort of the business processes that have been embedded for so long in an organization, and to a certain degree you're kind of shifting those through a 90-degree turn. That can feel like a real uphill struggle. So you definitely need to think about how you're going to develop resilience. Where are you going to draw that support and encouragement from to keep going? And I think my final thought on this is that it's not possible to deliver great customer experience without great collaboration across an organization. And very often, I think collaboration is a quality that is overlooked in internal performance management systems. And so I think if you truly want to drive change in an organization, it is so important to think about how you will celebrate and reward those examples of great collaboration within the organization, because that is the only way that truly great customer experience will come about.
Very true, Jo. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Jo. Your insights were so valuable, and I know our audience is gonna enjoy the interview because I surely did.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So we will be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we will see you around for the next one.